I never considered myself a religious person. I was crossing the street with my best friend, laughing. Those ideas never really influenced my life. I might have believed in something out there, but I never spent any time dwelling on it. My routine was straightforward. School, scrolling through social media and hanging out with friends. I lived in the moment, never worrying about what the future might hold. That is, until that fateful day. It began like any other. I was crossing the street with my best friend, laughing over something trivial, when everything happened in an instant. A blaring horn, frantic screams, and then the collision. I felt my body being flung backward like a discarded explanation. That's when it hit me. Darkness engulfed me, and it was terribly amiss. This wasn't. It felt as if something was waiting. Radiant light burst forth, slicing through the gloom like something even more daunting. Excuses or debates. I could only saw myself ridiculing those who cherished their faith. Terms. Now, standing in the air, a suffocating dread that I was dead. Panic surged through me, and I tried to scream. I attempted to rush toward my body, but I no longer had legs nor a voice. I was simply consciousness. Then, without warning, an unseen force began pulling me back with an indescribable power. At first I thought I was being led to heaven, drawn toward the light. But that's not what happened. Instead, darkness engulfed me. And it wasn't just any darkness, it was dense and suffocating, as if it were a living entity wrapping around me. The deep silence was broken by whispers, voices melding together, speaking in a language I couldn't grasp. A raw, primal fear seized me. The chill I felt wasn't merely physical, it seeped into my soul. That was when I knew something was terribly amiss. This wasn't heaven. The darkness kept drawing me in, and with every passing second, my terror intensified. I fought against it, trying to hold on to anything, but there was nothing but that oppressive void. The voices grew louder, some laughing, some crying, and others distorting my name in a mocking tone. I sensed something approaching, something unseen, and it filled me with a fear I'd never known. It felt as if something was waiting, eager to consume me. For the first time, I truly understood what absolute despair was. There was no one to help me. I was utterly alone. And the worst part was the realization that I belonged to that place. Then suddenly, a voice thundered through the darkness. "Stop!" The moment that word rang out, the shadow recoiled as if burned. A radiant light burst forth, slicing through the gloom like a fiery sword. The heat from that light was so intense I felt utterly exposed, as if every secret, every lie, every hidden flaw was laid bare. And there, in the midst of that blinding glow, I saw him. I didn't need any explanation. I recognized him immediately. Jesus stood before me. His gaze wasn't filled with anger or condemnation, but with something even more daunting: truth. He looked at me as though he could see everything I had been and all I might have become. In that moment, I realized something I'd never considered before. My entire life had been a series of choices, and I had chosen the wrong ones. I wanted to speak, to ask why this was happening, to plead for another chance, but I couldn't. In his presence, there was no room for excuses or debates. I could only feel. And what overwhelmed me was the weight of every misstep I'd taken. Every time I ignored that inner voice, every lie I told, every moment I strayed from the truth. Then, without him uttering another word, the visions began. My life played out before me like a film, each scene etched with real, palpable pain. I saw myself laughing at those who spoke of God. I saw myself ridiculing those who cherished their faith. I saw myself turning away from the suffering of others, simply to avoid getting involved. The most agonizing part was realizing all the chances I'd had to change. opportunities I'd dismissed without a second thought. It wasn't that I'd never felt an emptiness or questioned if there was something more. I had felt that void many times, but I shoved it aside, caught up in life's rush and the desire to live on my own terms. Now, standing before him, I grasped the heavy price I'd paid. Then the visions shifted. I no longer saw echoes of the past, but glimpses of a future yet to unfold. The world that emerged before me was unrecognizable. The sky was shrouded in a grotesque darkness, and the streets were ablaze. People were running, screaming, hiding from an unseen menace. I could feel it, the raw terror in the air, a suffocating dread that something was poised to devour us all. Shadowy figures moved among the living, and the most chilling part was that people didn't flee from them. They followed as if entranced, blindly marching toward their doom. Then I heard his voice again. Firm came the smell. A putrid simply consume. Tortured cry, but the look in his eyes was unlike anything I had ever. No tomorrow, no after. Oh, from that nightmare. All the heat, by living as if nothing matters until it's too late. As though I were in free fall. There was no rush of wind, no sense of an end, only an ever-intensifying heat. And then came the smell, a putrid stench of burned flesh, decay, and something utterly otherworldly assaulted my senses. Terror overwhelmed me before I could even glimpse my surroundings. And then I fell. The ground was rough and scorching. When I looked up, I saw nothing but destruction. Flames erupted from every corner, but these weren't the fires we know. They didn't simply consume. Tortured cries pierced the air, screams of pain, remorse, and absolute despair. And it was then that I saw the faces of people I knew, classmates, acquaintances, even those I'd barely noticed before. They were there, writhing, crying, and screaming my name as if begging me to save them. One of them was a close friend, someone I'd known for years, but the look in his eyes was unlike anything I had ever seen. A look of someone who, all too late, realized he would never escape that place. I wanted to run. I longed to escape, but there was nowhere to go, as if this nightmare were endless. And the worst part was the crushing certainty that hope was utterly absent. Time had no meaning there. There was no tomorrow, no after. Only relentless pain and eternal torment prevailed. The despair was so overwhelming that I screamed with all my might, begging for someone to pull me out of that abyss. And then I felt a firm hand gripping my wrist. The very voice that had once drawn me out of the darkness resounded again, declaring, "You cannot help them now." In that instant, I was pulled away from that nightmare. All the heat, the screams, the overwhelming despair evaporated in a moment, and I found myself once more in his presence. I trembled uncontrollably as I gazed at Jesus, no words needed between us. He sensed the devastation inside me, understanding exactly how shattered I felt. With deep sorrow in his eyes, he said, "People choose that fate by rejecting me, by living as if nothing matters until it's too late." I felt as though my heart would shatter, if it even still beat. His words weighed upon me like a final, unyielding sentence. They choose that fate. I wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that no one willingly chooses to be dragged into the darkness, that no one truly desires that end. Yet, deep down, I knew it was the bitter truth. Had been a warning I refused to heed. Anything I had ever seen, even without yet the gates remained shut for them. As if God were nothing more than a distant eye had been brutally exposed. Many of those, the fate of those condemned to hell. And still I pretended everything was fine. Before him, the answer was undeniable. My entire life had been a warning I refused to heed. Now I saw clearly that the world teemed with people just like me, living as if there were always more moments to spare, as if none of this were real. Yet it was, more real and raw than anything I had ever experienced. Then, suddenly, my eyes were drawn to something in the distance. A colossal gate made entirely of light, immense and brilliant, unlike anything I had ever seen. Even without stepping closer, I felt the essence of what lay beyond. Peace. A peace far greater than any fleeting joy I had ever known on earth. I knew that this was heaven, a place where those who passed through would know no more pain. But then something made my chest tighten. People were being pulled back, torn away before they could enter. They screamed, cried, and pleaded in Jesus' name. Yet the gates remained shut for them. I couldn't comprehend it. If they were calling for him, why were they denied entry? I looked to Jesus for understanding. Before I could ask, he answered, "Not everyone who calls me Lord truly belongs to me. Many know my name, but they have never given me their hearts." Those words struck me like a blow. How many people did I know who claimed to be Christians, yet lived as if God were nothing more than a distant idea? How many attended church out of habit or tradition, never truly surrendering their hearts to him? And worse still, how many felt safe just by uttering his name now and then, when, in reality, they had never truly known him? The vision of that gate left me frozen in shock. It was as if a long-hidden truth, one that everyone had chosen to ignore, had been brutally exposed. Many of those people believed they were destined for heaven, but at the final moment, they were pulled back. I longed to shut my eyes, to avert my gaze from it all, but I couldn't. The agony on their faces and the raw anguish in their cries were impossible to ignore. The hopelessness of those who realized far too late that they were never ready broke me apart inside. It was different from witnessing the fate of those condemned to hell, those who, deep down, had never truly cared. Yet these people believed they were saved, even though they'd have been there, but simply weren't. The aim for them. But his gaze was grave, and as he declared, "The time is near," to perceive what truly mattered. "What you saw," he said, "as long as they're issuing the warning and giving people a chance to see." Then, as the pages began to turn on their own, my heart raced. I saw vast blank spaces, names that should have been there, but simply weren't. The emptiness where their names belonged was like an open wound. Even worse, I saw names disappearing. They would appear for a moment, only to be erased as if they had never existed. People who had once followed God, but had drifted away, trading the eternal truth for fleeting pleasures, choosing the world over what truly mattered. I looked to Jesus in desperation, hoping he would tell me there was still time for them. But his gaze was grave and sorrowful. I swallowed hard, never having felt such raw terror in my entire life. Before I could utter a word, another presence manifested beside me, a colossal radiant being exuding an authority beyond description. I knew it was an angel, though not the kind we see in paintings or movies. This angel was imposing and powerful, and his voice boomed like thunder as he declared, "The time is near, judgment is coming, many will be lost." His words reverberated inside me like a final verdict, their weight nearly unbearable. I looked around, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of it all. Everything was connecting. The world was plunging into darkness, yet no one seemed to notice. Time was slipping away, while most were too consumed with their lives, their problems, their social media, and daily distractions to perceive what truly mattered. The urgency struck me so forcefully that my very spirit trembled. I longed to scream, to warn everyone, to do something. But the angel only gazed at me, and in his eyes lay an undeniable certainty. Most would never believe it. Then Jesus stepped closer, his expression serene, yet imbued with an inexplicable sorrow. "You need to tell what you saw," he said. "As long as there is life, there is hope. But time is running out." His words tightened my throat. I wanted to protest, to argue that no one would believe me, that everyone would dismiss it as a mere dream, something all in my head. Yet I understood I had no choice. It wasn't about whether people believed me or not. It was about speaking the truth, issuing the warning, and giving people a chance to see before it was too late. I didn't know how or where to begin, but deep within, I knew this was my mission. Jesus looked at me one last time, and without another word, everything around me began to fade. I felt my body being pulled back, as if I were being sucked into a vortex. The light faded away, his voice grew faint, and then I awoke. I opened my eyes abruptly, and everything around, she was dead. For 3 minutes. Oxygen deprivation delirium. But at night, I sensed presences in my room. The first time it happened, I couldn't ignore what had happened, nor could I pretend it. Yet I persisted. For deep within, surrounded by doctors and nurses, with my family nearby, crying as if they'd witnessed my death. Then came the words that shattered everything. She was dead. For 3 minutes. 3 minutes. That was all it took. Yet to me, it felt like an eternity. Unnoticed at first, tears began streaming down my face. How could I possibly explain it? How could I articulate an experience that went far beyond human understanding? I knew that no one would truly grasp it. To the doctors, it was just a successful resuscitation, and to others, perhaps a mere oxygen deprivation delirium. But I knew the truth. I had seen it. I had felt it. And from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. In the days that followed, I tried to dismiss what had happened, to convince myself it was all a trick of the mind. Yet the memories remained, vivid and unyielding, as if they were still unfolding before me. Then, even stranger occurrences began. At night, I sensed presences in my room, shadows that seemed to watch me. Whispers emerged from nowhere, murmuring words I couldn't understand, sending chills down my spine. And then, there was the worst of all. Sleep paralysis. I'd never experienced it before, but now it became a frequent terror. I'd wake up, paralyzed, feeling as if something was lurking nearby, something intent on silencing me, on erasing the memory of what I'd witnessed. The first time it happened, an inner instinct made me react. I tried to speak, and when I finally managed, a single word emerged. Jesus. In that very moment, the ominous presence vanished. The fear dissipated. And I knew without any doubt that everything I had seen was real. After that night, I realized my life would never be the same. I couldn't ignore what had happened, nor could I pretend it wasn't real. So I began to speak out, though it was difficult at first. When I told my family, I saw the mixture of pity and doubt in their eyes, as if they were listening politely, but not truly believing. Some even laughed, while others insisted I must have hallucinated, and some simply distanced themselves, as though my words were too disturbing to bear. Yet I persisted, for deep within I knew it was necessary. Amid all the disbelief, some people began to listen earnestly. In secret, a few approached me, seeking more details, wanting to understand, desperate to learn how to avoid ending up like those I'd seen in hell. For these souls, I felt it was worth continuing, even if the world branded me crazy or chose to ignore me. If even one person understood the truth and changed me awake and crying as if I were still trapped in that imagined. I can't and won't, yet lacking genuine commitment. Treat of it is real. I realized that I became one of those people. I almost, when the door closes, there will be no Most terrifying part. Most people refuse to listen. Is trying to silence me. Other times, nightmares so vivid invade my sleep, leaving me awake and crying as if I were still trapped in that darkness. Yet every time, I did what I had learned. I called his name. And invariably, the darkness would withdraw, revealing something I had never truly understood before. The name of Jesus wields undeniable power. And if there's a force striving to silence me, it only confirms that my mission is more critical than I ever imagined. I can't and won't stop, because I know time is running short. After that, I began to view the world through new eyes. What once appeared normal, life filled with distractions and trivial concerns, now unveiled hidden truths. I saw how people wandered in blindness, living as if tomorrow were promised, as if eternity were a myth. I witnessed countless souls claiming to be believers, yet lacking genuine commitment, treating God like a mere accessory for moments of need. More than ever, I became aware of the unseen battle raging all around us. Evil never needs to manifest overtly. It seeps into everyday life, lurking in our thoughts and in the small choices that subtly lead us away from truth. Now that I see it clearly, I can no longer shut my eyes or pretend that none of it is real. I realized that my duty isn't to force belief after all. Even Jesus never coerced anyone into faith, but to speak out, to warn, to share what I witnessed, and to let each person decide for themselves. Ultimately, everything comes down to that choice. God doesn't send anyone to hell. People send themselves there by rejecting him, ignoring the signs, and living as though nothing matters. I nearly became one of those people. I almost missed my second chance, and I know that many won't get one. So I speak. I tell my story. Some laugh, others dismiss it, but there are those who truly listen. And if even one life changes because of my words, then all of this will have been worthwhile, for I know what is coming. I have seen it. Time is slipping away, and when the door closes, there will be no turning back. Sometimes I wonder why I was given the chance to return when so many perish without ever knowing the truth. I don't have all the answers, but I know it wasn't by accident. It wasn't meant solely for me. I was given this gift so I could speak, so I could shout if necessary, to warn people of what awaits them if they continue living on autopilot, indifferent to what truly matters. And that is the most terrifying part. Most people refuse to listen. They'd rather believe that everything will be okay, that there's plenty of time, that God somehow makes it all work out in the end. I see, in their eyes, the same in my room at night, attempting to paralyze me, from the despair in the cries of those turned away from heaven's chest, a deep inner nudge that this is real. There might not be a last minute. I know for me, it was for everyone. Share your thoughts in the comments, because your opinion truly matters. Seems to be constantly trying to silence me. Since I began sharing what I saw, spiritual attacks have intensified. Sometimes I feel a presence in my room at night, attempting to paralyze me, to force me to give up. Other times, strange thoughts arise, as if a disembodied voice is trying to convince me that it was all just a dream, that I'm crazy, that forgetting is the easier path. But I do not forget. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I remember the darkness, the voices, the haunted expressions of those trapped in hell, and the despair in the cries of those turned away from heaven's gate. I remember the weight of Jesus' gaze, and I know that no matter what happens, I must keep going. Perhaps some of you will come across this and simply scroll on, laughing or dismissing it as the ramblings of another lunatic. And that's perfectly fine. But I believe someone out there will feel this message differently. There will be someone who reads these words and feels a tightening in their chest, a deep inner nudge that this is real, that this warning is meant for them. If that person is you, please don't ignore it. Don't just treat this as another random story on the internet. I'm not here to scare anyone or to win you over with fancy words. I'm simply sharing what I saw, what I felt, and what I lived. I'm saying, don't wait until it's too late. Don't live under the illusion that you can always repent in the final moments, because there might not be a last minute. I know one thing for sure. My mission is to speak out, to tell my story, and I will continue to do so until my final day, because I know time is running out. The world is changing, events are accelerating, and those with eyes to see and ears to listen know that something significant is unfolding. What I witnessed wasn't a warning just for me. It was for everyone. I don't know how many will believe it, but I do know that when the door finally closes, no one can say they weren't warned. If all of this were merely a delusion, why do so many people around the globe report similar experiences? And what if it's real? What if time truly is running out? Now I'm curious, have you ever had an inexplicable spiritual experience? What do you think about all of this? Please share your thoughts in the comments, because your opinion truly matters. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on content that could change your life. Here, we delve into truths that many prefer to ignore, but that have the power to transform lives. Since you've made it this far, I strongly encourage you to watch the next video that pops up on your screen. It might just open your eyes even more. See you there. Take care.